Good morning, ladies.
Hello.
Hello, and good afternoon, and good evening, and good night as to where you are in the world. We've just been chatting, haven't we? We've hit the record button and everyone's gone really quiet. But it's the Divine Lady Day. It's Valentine's Day. It's a bit like Boxing Day, isn't it, ladies? Does
Without the
everybody
drink.
want, does everybody want to introduce themselves?
Yeah,
Gillian, do you
happy
want
God. Okay, so I'm Gillian from Mystic Healing Therapies, gillianengland.com. I'm a mystic, a mother, and also a psychotherapist by trade, having a long career in the NHS, but now I work for myself, which is a blessing.
absolutely. Lucinda, do you want to?
I'm Lucinda. I'm a mother, my most sacred role, and I'm a mother of four, three girls, and recently a boy. I am a birth keeper and lactation consultant. I trained with When Push Comes to Shove, which is how I know Nikita.
Oh, that segues nicely then. Um, I'm Nikita. I'm a mum of two girls. They are 16 and 4. And I'm the founder of When Push Comes to Shove, which is a holistic, alternative, decentralized maternity structure. I'm a trauma specialist, coach, and author, and I'm currently doing my PhD in lifestyle medicine.
And Victoria.
Hello, I'm Victoria. I am a mum to four boys, spanning over an 18-year gap. I am a midwife. I was an NHS midwife until last year, and I've whistleblown against safer maternity. And I've just signed my first book deal. So I'm going to be writing a book, and I am here just to share the truth, really, and get it all out there. It's the missing piece to the puzzle of women's stories.
Amazing. I'm Rachel Russell, and I am a mummy to 6 chickens, four of which I hatched myself. In fact, I hatched 7, but 3 were boys, so I had to give them away because cockerels don't really like each other in the pen. But yeah, so I am a mummy to chickens, but no babies. So I'm coming from a unique perspective as to I don't have no idea about childbirth, and I've got lots of questions for you ladies actually. So and there's lots of empowering for other ladies in this world. I'm learning to fly a helicopter. I'm doing cloud busting and ending wars, and managing or help to manage a lit project, which is Live in Truth. So lots and lots of big things happening in this world. But yeah, so that's me. But who wants to go first in terms of I think Nikita. Nikita is I think a revolutionary lady, aren't you? With this push comes to when push comes to shove.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Um, it's it's very strange. I didn't actually start when push comes to shove, as you see it now. That was not my intention. Um, my first birth, nearly 17 years ago, was a car crash birth. Um, it was very stressful, traumatic, and I remember like being a little bit obsessed what had happened to me. I couldn't quite understand what had happened, and so many people shared the same story. And I started speaking to my grandmother, who was a wise Indian sage, and I explained to her what was going on, and she said one sentence, and it blew my mind. She goes, "Oh, what you've experienced is common, not normal." And then I got a little bit obsessed with birth. I started midwifery training, but I hated it. I felt it was a conveyor belt system. It wasn't for me. And they weren't looking at root cause, which is when I got really interested in lifestyle medicine and why am I doing my PhD now. So, in a word, if you go to an allopathic doctor or if you go to a standard NHS midwife with a problem, or let's say, for example, you went there with a penis growing on your head, they could cut it off and patch you up and send you on your way, but they don't teach you why you became a dickhead in the first place. So I'm more interested in why people are dickheads and how we've got from A to B. So I got very obsessed with birth. I started to learn. Well, I was self-taught for most part, which is not a popular want in society. And I met some interesting granny midwives, and I even got to speak to some parteras, which are traditional Mayan midwives, who can't read or write, but man, they know birth. Like they know everything. So that was my journey. And then I eventually had my little girl in 2020, in the middle of a very interesting time to be alive. And I birthed on my terms the way I wanted. And then afterwards, I thought, oh my gosh, there are women giving birth in masks. And yes, they're wearing masks. And it made me really sad. So I started interviewing a lot of people I know that have a lot of weight to them, their titles, etc., etc. So I started interviewing them, doctors who have had twin home births, and midwife friends of mine who were independent midwives and were going against the narrative and have had very successful outcomes. And I need to go back a bit. I used to be a singer-songwriter, and I worked in a very insipid music industry. I used to write for Sony, and then I left all that because I felt it was wrong, and it just felt yucky. And then I wrote a song called Breathe Again, and the idea was to promote the movement of empowered women and you can make choices. And I teamed up with another birth company. I won't say their name because there's no need. And as we were going forward to try and raise awareness, I just started When Push Comes to Shove, and they started sending me emails saying, oh, you were on Sky News and you mentioned When Push Comes to Shove. You were on this channel and you mentioned When Push Comes to Shove. Stop mentioning it. You're just the singer. And I said, oh, no, that's my story. I shall continue to talk about it. And they were investing in a PR campaign for this song. And then it got to a point where they said, you need to stop saying women. You need to say birthing people. And I said, no. So I got a lot of hate for that. And then finally they said, right, you keep mentioning When Push Comes to Shove, so we're going to withdraw the PR campaign money. I said, no problem. And I don't want to acquiesce into something I don't believe in. So that's absolutely fine. And then in the meantime, I got another investor, a silent investor, and they continued to see all my PR stuff. They thought they were still funding it. So the very next day I started getting tweets from midwives saying, you're disgusting, you're going to burn in hell and you're stealing money from. I was like, what? Where's this coming from? They thought that I was doing that. I wasn't. And in retrospect, I kept going outside myself. Oh, I didn't do it because I have this gaslighting wound. And clearly I was absolutely blessed to have that experience, because it actually took me inside to see, well, what core wound have you not healed yet, woman? And it was an I'm not enough wound. And then my journey on trauma began. And anyway, I started making these courses because I sent my Telegram channel about birth to Robin Minotti, and he was very interested in it. He shared it and it went boom overnight. And before I knew it, I was on the Better Way conference stage at their inaugural conference. I was the birth ambassador for the PHA. I'd been invited to Canada, to America, to Australia, to New Zealand to talk about birth. And When Push Comes to Shove, as you see it today, was born. And now we're in 10 countries. And what I'm really focusing on at the moment is, just understanding how to navigate the system. Just understanding birth physiology is not enough. It's actually quite superficial. What I'm focusing on is the inner work as well, because if we're going to start birthing a new generation of children that don't need to heal, we need to heal. I have just finished yesterday writing my new book called The Mirror in the Matrix. And it is
I've got goosebumps.
It's about the work, the mirror. We keep going outside ourselves and bitching and moaning, complaining, but it's nothing to do with the outside. It's the mirror in us, and we need to fix these core wounds. Someone actually commented on our video, Victoria, because me and Victoria did a live, and this woman was like, I've been following Victoria for a while. She's brilliant, but I switched off the second you started victim blaming. And I thought, okay, I'm not being understood. So I've really described what I mean. It's not about victim blaming. It's understanding we have a victim consciousness, and we keep going outside ourselves for solutions and salvation when everything is here. And that's the work I'm focusing on at the moment. You can't fix birth by changing NMC guidelines. You can't fix birth by changing NICE guidelines and changing the system, because if you do, it's superficial and it's temporary, and someone else will come along with another a fucking irk, and it won't be enough, and it won't be enough. So what I'm trying to support people to do, if and when they're ready, you want to see awesome fruits, you've got to change your roots. And if everyone starts doing the inner work and stops going outside themselves, we will see a byproduct of a maternity system that reflects self-love rather than our own self-hatred.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's the, like that saying, as above, so below. Well, we do see what's above us, which is, I suppose, why we say as above. But as below is, we always ground first before, we go up. So it should really be as below, as above.
It's fractal. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
We think we're separate. We have an illusion in the matrix of separation, but we're not. We are in separate bodies. And when you go and bitch and moan and complain outside, even if you're bitching and moaning about the system, what's the point? It's just creating more of a fear energy to keep this matrix as it is. We go within and mind our own business. Do you know that I saw an interview with a woman who was 107, I think she was, and she was being interviewed, and they said, "What's the secret to longevity?" And she said, "Minding my own fucking business."
I want to meet her.
But Lucinda, did you learn through Nikita?
Well, I met Nikita after my first free birth, which was my third child.
Wow.
Just before.
Say again.
Just before you had Elodie.
Yeah, just before, because it was oh yeah, that's right. Just before, but I met you physically. I met you when Elodie was born. But no, I had a wobble at about 30 weeks, which now we know is what my body kind of does. Which kind of, for me now, definitely is a lesson of trust. And when I look at all my pregnancies, it happens where I get potentially like a hind water leak, or I get really strong Braxton Hicks, or something that ordinarily women would go to the hospital for and not kind of tune into baby, listen, and take the advice from like within. So that, I thought this time round, fourth time round, that like I wouldn't need that little test. I've done that inner work, but yet again, fourth time round, it came up again. And yeah, but going back to your question, Rachel, of how I met Nikita, it was on the journey of my first wild pregnancy, which was 2021, born Feb 2022, so that kind of bracket of time. So it was, we weren't quite sure what was going on in the world, and it was when you were awake, it was all like, oh, what's going to happen. Like I bought like all reusable nappies because I thought all the shops will be shut and I won't be allowed in because I won't be vaccinated and I won't be able to get nappies for my baby. And it was a wild time. So I initially had made the decision at the very early days of my pregnancy out of fear of, I don't trust the hospital. I don't want to birth in a hospital. But that progressed into strength and ownership of my pregnancy, because I thought, actually, if I'm doing this, I need to rid the chances of needing the hospital. So I've got to take ownership of my health and well-being and everything. So I did cold water swimming all the way up until I was 36 weeks pregnant, where I'd go to the river every day and I'd swim, I'd meditate, and I would check in with baby. I meditate every day. And I just learnt this trust of my body and its ability. I got distracted then from your cat, Nikita. I was thinking, I thought it was behind me. So yeah, and then the birth was miraculous. It definitely had, because I did have a doula, And it definitely
What's
had
a doula?
like a birth keeper. So basically, all the women that Nikita trains, they go into the world as doulas and work with
Doula is Greek. The word it means woman servant. And contrary to popular belief, thinking the oldest profession is prostitution, it's actually women servants to doulas. So they're there to provide emotional and practical support during birth. They're not there to do anything medical.
Wow. Sorry, I interrupted.
I worked with a herbalist and a doula. And actually, interestingly, the herbalist had never, so she was a doula, a doula, a doula, a doula, a doula, and a herbalist. And she actually had fear of me free birthing. She'd been a doula for many births, but she'd always had midwives. And she had fear around my birth to a point that she actually missed the birth. And I think she did do that on purpose. Which is fine because I wasn't having a baby for her. I was having it for me, but she didn't even wait till the placenta was born, which took 4 hours later. So when I look back at that, I can see it all really clearly, but at the time I didn't because you're kind of fogged. But yeah, so then Nikita, after I had that birth and we talked more and she learned what I'd been doing before having LOD in terms of supporting women breastfeeding, I did her course. And then I trained the January afterwards, and then I started working with women that year and supporting women at births. And I set up my little business of maternal traditions. So I help women primarily postnatally, because I think no matter what birth you've had, you can be scooped up in the postnatal net and nurtured with anything from Bencomb binding to closing of the bone ceremonies and breastfeeding support. Even if you've had 4 babies, there's still support that can happen with breastfeeding. And I think it's very much overlooked when you look at our statistics of breastfeeding and where we are with the world. I think, yes, birth is massive, but breastfeeding is huge. Like when you look at, a baby boy's testosterone levels in the first 6 months of life are that of the same as a fully grown man. And to get to build testosterone, it comes from cholesterol. Well, the only cholesterol that's in baby's food before 6 months is breast milk. You don't get it in formula. And then you look at things with allergies of milk, with soya, which is estrogen based. So we're basically whatever testosterone is built in those first 6 months of life is programs that child for their teenagehood and manhood. So if we're messing with it at that early infancy, then you've basically that's done with for adulthood. And I think that's why we've got massive issues. And the more we increase to formula feeding, so in reality, it is more important to breastfeed a boy than it is a girl based on that, because it affects them for the rest of their life. I mean, it does anyway, but in terms of their testosterone and manhood, it has deep effect.
I just would like to just comment on something that Nikita said, which ties into what Lucinda's just said as well about doing the inner work. It always starts from within. We project things out, but it's the inner journey that counts. And as a friend of Lucinda's, I've been sort of around Lucinda for a pregnancy, and I just want to honor all the women that free birth, because it is such a divine process. Where I look at things, it's such a divine thing to have total and complete trust in yourself. I've seen Lucinda through a pregnancy, and I've seen how she's held a strength, held a line, held on to that inner knowing. She's gone within, instead of rushing down to get reassured from some medic, she's gone absolutely within, done the inner work. And I've been with you, haven't I, Lucinda, like as a friend since throughout your pregnancy. And I just want to honour that in Lucinda, but all you women that free birth. I mean, I had my children over 20 years ago, hospital births. But if I was doing it again, I would choose a different path. But I just want to honour that any woman that free birth has got to have done a lot of inner work to have the mental and spiritual capacity to trust herself in that divine process. And I want to honor Lucinda and her process, because I've seen her and I've seen the sheer strength of her inner self and the journey that she's been on to birth a beautiful baby. And all of you women out there that do this, I absolutely from my heart honor you, because it is such a sacred thing. And, maybe we'll get on to talking about holding the birth portal space. That's something that's very close to my heart as a mystic. I see things from different dimensions. I think even people that wouldn't call themselves spiritual at all, and have an aversion to spirituality, when their baby is born and it's placed in their hands, they somehow have that link to the miraculous life force and the creator, because it is such a massively spiritual thing. So even if you're not really spiritually aware, I think it touches most people's hearts, doesn't it, a birth? But one thing that I'm very keen and to sort of bring out into the consciousness of women birthing now is the sacred space of the birth portal. When we enter into this realm, it's a very sacred place, but also it's a place that if you can hold the space from a spiritual point of view, it just helps to bring the baby into this realm in a very safe and sacred space. So that's, one thing that I'm very keen to put out in the world as people are waking up. If I would have said this 10 years ago, people, would have just thought I was a total crazy, because I've been awake spiritually, literally all my life. And now I'm in my 50s. I've seen a massive change in people's receptivity to this kind of phenomena. So I think now is the time to sort of honor that and bring that out into the consciousness, so that women giving birth, it will be part of the birth plan to have the birth space kept sacred for them. Does that make sense to you, or am I just talking gobbledygooks?
I really wanted to highlight what you just said about Lucinda's journey, because it was an absolute honor to hold space for her remotely throughout her journey. Because there are two levels of awakening, in my opinion. So level one is you have an external awakening and you think, oh, maybe Big Pharma doesn't care about health. They care about keeping us sick. Maybe the government doesn't have our best interests at heart. So that's a superficial level of awakening. And then you have an inner awakening where you realize we're not separate, we're all connected. The answer is love, not fear. And then you look at the freedom movement, they're trying to fix a problem with the same level of energy that created it. Fear, 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 more fear. And it's not the answer. And then you go inside, you have like this, oh my God, I have got this macro view of the world and I get it. And it's very, very lonely when you have an inner awakening sometimes. Now, Lucinda, if she were my client, and she's not, she's my friend, she would have been my ideal client, because I'll give you an example of the level of work we do if we're doing proper work in birth. So a superficial level would be, I've got this problem, I have this pain. And usually you'd go to a midwife, you'd go outside yourself, and you would get validation from another human being. Now, while I'm not saying you have to do a degree in midwifery and a birth keeping course to know everything, that's knowledge. Wisdom is different, and wisdom is internal. So I'd be on the phone to Lucinda. She'd say, all right, I've got this coming up. Now, instead of going outside, I'm like, okay, cool, connect. And she'd go under and under and under and under to the point where the fears that she had around birth would dissolve. And this is the level of work necessary to, number one, have an empowered birth with no attachment to an outcome, by the way, because an attachment to an outcome is the source of all suffering. So if you've got an attachment to an outcome and you've got this, I've got these strong beliefs, and if anyone challenges it, it's going to just push me over with a feather. So you get rid of the attachment to the outcome and you do it from a place of love. I saw a rise of free birth in 2020, and some of it was great, but some of it was misguided. So a lot of people making pre-birthing choices from a place of fear, as in, I ain't going to the hospital, it's scary, they're corrupt. That is not informed consent. That is not making a choice from love. That is making a choice from fear. And where there's fear, there are problems.
And that comes really nice. Sorry.
No, go, Rachel, continue.
Because we've got Victoria, the bombshell lady. I'm gonna call it the bomb. Only because of I mean, like Nikita, you've written a book, and Victoria, you're just about to write a book, but it comes really nicely into, especially on the hospital bit, and I'll chime in after that one because I've got massive fears around it. But yeah, so Victoria, you kind of uncovered all this crazy stuff going on, didn't you?
Yeah, so I've been a midwife since 2017. You know, I'd done the degree. It came from an ego place. I want to be this. Oh, I'm a midwife. I wanted that title. And if a lot of us are honest with ourselves, if you're connected to yourself, nobody would go into midwifery. They would go down the doula route, I believe, if they truly understood why they were doing it, because the system is red taped. And I'm a believer that if anything has to be red taped, religion or relationships, it's unhealthy. It's again, like Nikita said about having that, it's not informed, is it? Because you're having to stay within the lines of something. Victoria doesn't stay in the line. She doesn't like the line. She doesn't like the restriction and the control and the coercion. It's like the shackles on my wrists are starting to like rattle like they did in the witch days, and I'd be like, oh, this is a bit of a witch wound, what's going on here? And the system is good in one way, and if there is an acute emergency and somebody's life is at risk, yes, I've never seen such wonderful work. And that is really important because, like Nikita just said about the freedom movement, we saw and we heard the horror stories of women making decisions about birth in fear. So they would be birthing at home out of fear, with no connection and trust to their body. And that then became a real problem, that then midwives were disliking doulas. That created it's perfectly planned. They want midwives and doulas to be against each other, and they want women and midwives to be against each other. And it's working because now women out in the mainstream media are now scapegoating everything to the midwives. The midwife stories aren't out there, and the puzzle can't be complete without that story. So what you've got the mainstream media saying, Nottingham, which they should, pleaded guilty for the baby deaths and that there's all this payout of money, but now nobody's trusting midwives. But actually, is it the midwives? Let's look at this as above, so below, this systematic structure, this infrastructure that is so multifaceted and it's got so many arms and legs to it. You can't work it out. This is why I really feel that when someone says to me, like, I got a message this morning, you're really unprofessional, you're really insulting women. Well, if my truth insults you, get your mirror and go in. I didn't reply. I don't reply to any of these messages. I don't engage. So I believe at the moment, this journey is just for this reason. It's to bring the truth. And it's uncomfortable. And it's really awkward. And it's like, oh, people go cringe. But I just post truth after truth with backed up facts. This isn't just my opinion that I've seen. It's the feeling that I felt. I've walked the trauma. I feel like it's blood on like dripping down the walls. And even now I say that I feel the tight in my chest because it's so traumatic, and the screaming and the shouting and the bells and I've got some vicarious trauma from that, which is why I can't ever see myself being a doula, because I live in fear of that birth, because I've been so indoctrinated and it's seeping in me somewhere, and it will come out. I will purge it out eventually, but it's just time. So what you see is midwives from very early on being enticed in to become a midwife. It's amazing. Now, whenever you tell someone you're a midwife, they go, what a wonderful job, because it is, but not under the NHS, not under the NMC, which is the nursing and midwifery body, and certainly not under the Royal College of Midwives. So let's just do some stats. The RCM are the richest union in the world, one of them, 10 million a year.
What's RCM?
Is a union for midwives.
Oh.
So I think majority of midwives are with the Royal College of Midwives. They're the richest union in the world, 10 million a year. And I think they pay 9 million in pensions. So there's no money to really go back into midwives practice, to fitness to practice claims. They don't help anybody when they're going through trauma. They're linked to the Nursing and Midwifery Council. The Nursing and Midwifery Council was taken over by the government in 2001. People don't know this. Midwives don't click with it. So you've got a government paying you and you've got a governing body governing you. And then they just keep doing all these national drivers. So what they do is, oh, there's been an incident at these hospitals. Let's fund someone to go and do an inquiry into the hospital. The themes that come out are the same as every hospital. They're no different. It's either staffing, communication, substandard care, and patients not being listened to is huge. So what they then do is they've spent £1 billion on that inquiry. You then get more tasks as a midwife. You then go in as a midwife with 15-minute appointments to see a woman. So to check her name, date of birth, check her address, ask her how she is. Now, you ask a pregnant woman how they are, they'll talk to you all day because it's coming normally, as Nikita talks about, from a place of fear or trauma. I've got to dip her urine, do her blood pressure, just check through her notes to check everything's been done. She's had her scans up to date. This is in line with red tape, remember, not that I believe it. All her scans are up to date. She's had all her bloods. All her bloods are normal. Because remember, you don't see the same women twice. You're seeing lots of different women. There's no continuity. So the last midwife might have missed something that I then need to double check. 15 minutes is all I have to do all of that, and to listen into the baby, and to measure her fundus, and to listen into her and the baby, check her pulse, then write up all my notes. Then I might have to make a phone call. So you are running in this constant burnout as a midwife around the clock. So you're heightened stress. You're living in fear of litigation. You're living in fear when you go home. Oh my God, did I miss that? Oh my God, did I miss that? Did I miss that? Did I miss? You're literally like this. We are tense. We are hostile. We don't know each other. So I worked in the same hospital for 10 years. I cannot tell you, other than my two friends, anybody else's children's names, where they live, when their birthdays are, because there is a disjoint on purpose. It's perfectly planned so you don't recognize the trends. So then, like Nikita, and we've talked about this on our call, you've got women coming in fear-based, and then you've got midwives coming in fear-based and stress. You've got this ingredient of no love. It's just fear and stress and adrenaline. And that's how you're birthing these generations. So then you've got little midwives that come along and go, oh, something's not quite right. I'm going to do what is right, and I'm going to be enticed to go to Freedom to Speak Up, which is a huge campaign in the NHS called Freedom to Speak Up Guardians. And I went to the Freedom to Speak Up. I then went to my managers and saying, this is really unsafe. I'm really concerned about this, this, and this. And then I'm starting to go to work with only 2 midwives on labour ward. 2 for a whole 11-room labour ward. So because the staffing, people left because of the stress and because of COVID. So you've then you've got your staffing reduced, but what's missing is me going to the door and saying to a lady, you're already vulnerable. You're already living in fear of lots of reasons, the media, other people. You're not connected to yourself. And when you come in here, it's not safe. That's the bit that's missing. So I can give her control back and say, this is the truth. This is the truth from me as a midwife, a professional with a registration. I'm letting you know that it's not safe in here, but you can still come in, but it's short-staffed, I give her a choice. I'm not allowed to do that. We were told off for doing that. We're not allowed to tell women the truth. So then I escalated this a bit further into I need to put in complaints. And as it got bigger, what I'm then seeing is you're getting the pressure of e-learning. So you work 2 days a week. I couldn't work any more than that. I was physically burnt out. I was exhausted on 2 shifts a week. I couldn't function either side of those days. So then I'm getting emails, you haven't done your e-learning. Well, I'm not doing it at home, which they wouldn't pay you to do. So then when you're on shift, they'd be at you on shift, you haven't done your e-learning. So then you'd be saying, well, take me off shift to go and do my e-learning, which they couldn't because they didn't have the staff. Wow. So everything was escalating and the burnout was getting really heavy. So then you're becoming this you're antagonized, you're snappy, you're not being friendly to one another, and then this whole system was starting to like combust out. Then when I did finally leave and I walked out and didn't go back, I then got a call from a director of the hospital saying that whistleblowers go missing overnight. So I'm obviously being met with, am I going to go missing because I'm whistleblowing? So then moving it on, then the external side comes in, which is the women and the midwives that don't want you to tackle this problem, who are then now saying I'm a baby killer, which is not true. So you've got all this, you've got inside with the red tape, you then go external and you find strangers who are triggered by my truth, who are then attacking from their place of fear and trauma and not enough and everything like this onto me. But because I've put this mirror around me to reflect what this means, I'm now standing in my truth and honor, and it's antagonizing those people in the wrong way. It's not intended that way. So where we've got to now is we've got, I think it was something like 1/3 of hospitals are inadequate. So if you look at Florence Nightingale and her campaign for cleanliness, that's important. Women all used to birth at home, and I think the stillbirth rates around them were about, I want to say 30%. So the women that didn't have good sanitation came to hospital to birth. That's fine. But where was the tip? Where was that unbalance to then go, everybody must birth in hospital? Because someone said this phrase to me, and I love it, and I'll hold it dear. You are only one generation away from being forgotten. That generation in the 60s or 70s that tipped that balance, if it's not in the mainstream media, we don't know what was going on in the communities to scare these people about home birth. Where did it come from? Who led it? So we've now tipped into a hospital that's the safest place, which we now know the stillbirth rates must have risen, which they're not, they still haven't given the statistics out yet. They've changed the reporting statistics of stillbirth since COVID. We now know that the fertility rates have dropped 1.44 per woman since COVID. And we know that the birth rates drop, which means the stillbirth rate can't have remained the same, and they're still not putting those figures out there. So we've now got all of these variables coming in, and we've got no platform to bridge this together. So what we're now, I feel we're probably in, us just in this room now, are in one of the most profound places where you've got a midwife with the truth of the system. You've got Lucinda, who's birthed in a free way. You've got Nikita, who's coming at it from that doula. But what is the system set up? Don't trust doulas. Doulas don't trust midwives. You're all at each other. You're all arguing. Women and midwives are now at a place where they're all arguing. And we've got this system that has separated and segregated us. So we never piece the puzzle together.
I think now to look at why that's happened.
Yes.
And this is fundamental. I love, Victoria, that you were so honest and said, I went into midwifery from a place of ego. And this is, if you look at midwives and their attachment styles and their trauma, they've all got something in common, and it's the I'm not enough wound. And they have to get that enough external validation. Now, why did this happen? So children are not born questioning their worth. They don't arrive in the world wondering if they're good enough, lovable enough, valuable enough. They don't second guess their right to take up space. But what happens is a child is a mirror to their parents. They don't have this internal sense of self yet, so they absorb their identity through their parents' reactions, words, and emotions. Now, for the most part, we've got parents that are not healed. I'm not saying we don't have parents who don't love us. That is not what I'm saying, but they are unhealed and they're unaware of the generational trauma they're passing down. Now, a mammal, including us, we need a primary caregiver to survive. A reptile can scurry out of an egg and off it goes and it survives. We need a primary caregiver. So what happens as we start coming up in the world as a child? Let's say, for example, you're 2 years old and you're out with your mama and your mama is unhealed and you bump into an uncle. Let's call him Uncle Phil. And the mum says, oh, give your uncle a hug. And the little girl goes, I don't want to do that. Now, if the mother were honest, this would be the conversation. My darling, you're going to have to give your uncle a hug because I get my validation externally. I don't feel enough. I feel I've got a big fear of rejection. And if you don't do it, I feel Phil's going to reject me. So I want you to do what I'm telling you because you're going to help my feelings, if she was honest. Now, the child has a choice, 2 choices. They remain authentic or they choose an attachment. And a child will choose an attachment every single time because without an attachment, they will die. And so the ego is born. And the ego comes in various forms. You've got saviors. I definitely resonate with that. That was me. You get bleeding empaths who can't sit with their own trauma, so they listen to everyone else's problems. You've got helicopters who have to make sure everyone is doing exactly what they're doing so they can be okay in themselves. You've got tyrants, shields, someone in child mode who can't make any decisions. And all these archetypes are built as a shield. They are built to protect the ego. Now, what is the ego? The ego is just your definition of who you are according to where you've come from, the thoughts. This piece of paper proves my worth. It's thoughts. Now, we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness behind our thoughts. And if we can all get to the awareness behind our thoughts, we will see the matrix for what it is. We live in a simulation. It's our simulation, but a simulation nonetheless. We have created this. So the midwifery system that Victoria was just telling us about, it is a reflection. It is a mirror of our not enoughness. So we have 3 core wounds. I'm not enough. I'm going to be rejected and I'm going to be abandoned. And I see this time and time again. Let's say, for example, I get a woman call me. I'm like, hello, when push comes to shove. Oh, you got to help me. I'm 41 weeks. They say I've got to be induced and the midwife made me feel this. What do you mean the midwife made you feel? A mirror cannot reflect what isn't there. So if you were completely rooted... Did someone say something?
Sorry, I was going to say something, but sorry, carry on.
Okay. So if you're rooted in love, no matter what the midwife says, it's not going to rock you. So she's holding up a mirror to, it might be the not enough wound. Now, you may be lacking in knowledge, but that's fine. You seek the knowledge. The only way you're going to be rattled is if this is not secure. I had one of the most honest conversations with the social services case. I get many of them because women who come to us have free birth, they've not vaccinated, they're not registered with a GP, and of course there's going to be social services. And this woman called me about 4 months ago and she goes, I've been referred to social services. Now, usually when I ask why, I get outside stuff because this bitch did this and this bitch didn't say this, and it's all outside blame, blame, blame. But I asked her a question and she answered on a deep level, and I was totally taken aback. I said, why were you referred to social services? And she went, oh, I've got a massive, massive fear of authority. I went, there you go. That's why you've been referred. Now, the outside stuff is a byproduct of that. So the reasons, the outside reasons, like not vaccinated, didn't get in contact with a GP or whatever, they're the superficial reasons, but they're the byproduct of the unhealed self. Gillian, my love, I'm dying to know what you...
I was going to sort of back up what you were saying about personal responsibility, you know, and the mirror. It's okay to project everything out onto everyone else. And that statement, they made me feel, you know, in my psychotherapy clinic, I'm always using that as no one can make you feel anything. You choose to feel that. This whole idea of personal responsibility, you know, if we can, instead of externalizing everything and blaming, then we're in our own power, aren't we? Because we're not looking for someone else outside of ourselves. We are responsible for ourselves. No one can make us feel anything. I've chosen to be offended at this. I've chosen to feel upset at that. But then getting back onto what Victoria was saying, I had a long career in the NHS. I used to be clinical lead in Derby City Primary Care Mental Health Services. And what Victoria was saying, there's a lot of good people in the NHS. I'm sure there's a lot of really good midwives. I'm sure there's a lot of really good therapists. But what we're up against in that system is government-driven policies that don't come from the heart. And it's always about business, business, business. When I was clinical lead, I'd got a spreadsheet and I knew to the exact penny how much each therapist was earning, because you got incentives for if you got them into recovery, you got incentives if you've ticked if they'd got health complaints, if what the gender was. All of this was a financial incentive. So therapists were doing paperwork, and just like you were saying, Victoria, about everything was trimmed down and you'd got to do your training outside of your clinical work, but do it in your own time. It got just like that in the therapy world as well. So it's across the board, but I would just say, because it's driven by policy, and who's the policy writers?
I've
They're
literally just written that before you even said it, so I didn't
right.
forget.
They're close to it's just government policy, and it's designed, and this, I sound like a conspiracy theorist now, but this is my own experience and my own reckoning of observations. It's just designed to divide and separate, put everybody under pressure, and take the heart out of caring. And a lot of professionals, whether they're going to it for an ego or not, I've seen that a lot, especially in, oh, I'm a therapist, oh, I'm a midwife. It's the same kind of ego sort of statement. But a lot of those people, on some levels, genuinely go in it because they want to help people. But then they aren't allowed to help people because they're so busy. I was supposed to get people into recovery in 6 sessions of psychotherapy. So if you've been in a concentration camp in Eastern Europe in the 1990s, or you've been satanically ritually abused, I was supposed to get you better in 6 sessions. I mean, how ridiculous. And then if the therapist didn't get that person functioning well after 6 sessions, they would lose they wouldn't get the financial incentive. And guess what? When you got to, I was on band 8A. When you're on band 8A, if you aren't performing, they can take you down a band, because your person that's been in a concentration camp and you've not got them better in 6 sessions. So therefore, your statistics, you're not getting enough clients in recovery. You can then lose a pay grade. That is truly what's going on in the NHS. That's why I walked away in 2018. And that's why I have my own clinical practice now. Because it's across the board. So, when Victoria's whistleblowing and whatever, I totally concur with that as my experience of a clinical lead in the National Health Service. So, it all marries in. I totally relate to what Victoria's saying. You've got really, really good, motivated, dedicated staff, but they can't do the job because of
You've
bureaucracy.
literally got a midwife going to work going, right, I've got Saving Babies' Lives Care Bundle. I've got the Embrace report where I know that which women are at risk. I've then got Periprem if it's a premature baby. I've got the maternity transformation program. I've got the digital stuff. That's all you think about. So I never put the trust into disrepute. I know the 6 C's off by heart, and I know the trust values off by heart. As long as I know all that when I go to interview, I put this in my exit interview. I never ever ticked a box to say I gave love, care, sat by a woman when she cried. As long as I ticked the fridge temp and I checked the resuscitaire, and I never once, and this is what I wrote in my exit interview, you're more bothered by a fridge temperature than you are by the fact that I've not sat next to a labouring woman all day. So what you've got is women who don't know these policies. They don't understand what periprem is, or maternity transformation, or better birth. All they care about is, am I safe? Is my baby safe? And are we going to be okay? And you, as midwives, cannot give them that. You're not even allowed to say the words, you're going to be okay, ever. They're talked out of you.
Mm.
So
Wow.
what we've got is, we've got all these women coming in looking for this gentleness, these midwives coming in thinking about just policy and not being these nurturers. And then you've got no postnatal care. It's completely disappeared.
And then you've got,
So
let's say, for example, a midwife did say, you're going to be okay, and she wasn't. She'll then sue the hospital.
yeah.
And then again, you've got people going outside of themselves, blaming, pointing, complaining. And then the midwives are, of course, oh, I can't say it, more fear there. Where does it stop?
Well, I've got an analogy for this. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So let's take this for instance. The last baby I delivered, the lady blamed herself straight away, default. I could have done something better. I didn't speak up enough. Her baby was compromised. This lady labored behind a curtain for 10 and a half hours on her own. No one helped her. No one really looked after her. She thought she was in the safest place. She was on a CTG. She wasn't able to move. She had no pain relief. All of it was fundamentally wrong and not at the best interest of this mother and baby. And because the system wasn't working, we aren't allowed to tell them to give them a choice. You can go home and birth and find someone if you wanted, but we're not allowed to say that. So what then happens is you've got this lady lying on a bed, waiting. She was biting the pillow, like shaking. She was waiting for someone to come and save her. She could have saved herself, but she doesn't understand that because she doesn't understand the whole picture. So this is why I did what I did next. So when I went and got her down against everything, I was like, I'm bringing her down because I need to, my heart could not stop thinking about her all day. I felt her. I get womb pain. I get contractions when women are in real pain. Like people used to say I was crazy. My nipples used to tingle. I was feeling these women. I'm an empath, so I was feeling uterine contractions when I get in the car after being with a laboring lady all day.
Wow.
The ether is everything. We are connected divinely by everything. So this lady, as soon as her baby was delivered and the baby was whisked off, being told that we don't know if your baby's going to survive. They didn't know what was going to happen. She went straight into default. She went straight into, I could have done something more. Oh my God, I didn't speak up enough. And I thought, I'm not letting you have that. I'm not letting you hold that. That's not okay. This is not right. So I left. It's the last baby I ever delivered. And thank God for that little baby who I see now. She is and was sent to me as a gift. And so was her mother. Now, what happened after that? I went to this family because I opened a movement of safer maternity and she joined it and she said, you didn't leave because of us, did you? You're such a great midwife. And I went, I left for you. This is the next step of this. What's missing here is restorative healing. Okay, stick with me. So this family have harbored this pain of, I went to the place of safety, a hospital. It's called a trust for a reason. Trust us. So you go straight there when you're in labor. Don't feel in your own space of safety. Come to us. You hand over your whole vulnerability. You're then feeling something's not right. You then are left with this huge trauma, which we know is secondary trauma, but still, for her to unpick it all, she needed to understand the system. So what I did with this family was I sat down and I told them everything about the hospital that day. The staffing, the cesarean section rates, everything about birth trauma, everything about what was going on within her. And since then to now, she does not blame herself one iota because she's got the missing piece of the puzzle. So when you see mainstream media saying midwives are dangerous, midwives are this, it's set up for that reason. So women do not trust midwives and women do not piece the puzzle together. And we're now going into another system of blame. That's what's missing. The puzzle is the midwife.
Could I just interject? Because we're coming up to the hour mark and we've talked about a lot of the traumas, a lot of the problems. I'd love Gillian to chime in terms of I suppose the esoteric side, because like you say that you felt your nipples and you had contractions even in your belly, remembering, because obviously you've been through this as well, and we are feeling creatures. We're beautifully endowed with all our emotions and how we connect and how we share. But Gillian, I think you've been holding space, haven't you? And I'd love to learn about, I suppose, the energetics and how we can help each other on that front and kind of move it out of, yes, it's the scariest world because it scared the life out of me, and probably one of the reasons I've never had children, because there's no way I'm going to ever do that. But that was from my story, basically. But I'd love to learn, because we're an hour into it, I understand the trauma, I understand these hospitals and everything is just, it's so corrupt, you know, from you know, all the things that we should be doing to things that we're not doing. You know, that there's something magical about, you know, everything happening and everything getting to such a ridiculous place that we've just got to change it, you know. And could you tell us a little bit more about your energetics, Gillian, please?
Well, I just feel really inspired by, you know, Victoria's story, Nikita's story, Lucinda's story, because they are setting a framework for this new golden age. So, you know, we are moving into the age of Aquarius. The stars are aligned. We are tipping. We are in a new paradigm of living now. And excuse me, I just think that, you know, we've needed people like these women here that will blow the whistle on the old system, that have got the courage to step forward and say enough is enough. But you know, we have to acknowledge the dark. We're not just all love and light. You know, a lot of that's a spiritual cul-de-sac, really, thinking everything's love and light. We've got to acknowledge that the dark exists, because if we don't acknowledge that the dark has happened, then we can't step forward into the light, because we've got to honor the experiences of the dark and honor the experiences of what's happened in order to see it, heal it, and move on. So, you know, from a dimensional point of view. So I talk quite a lot. I forgot to say I'm an author as well. I've got 2 books, Spiritual Development in 5D and Enchanted Earth. You can get them on Amazon or gillianengland.com. What we need in this new paradigm, what I talk about, is dimensions. So at the moment, most people operate in the 3rd dimension, where you perceive all of your information in life. It has to be evidence-based. You decode it from your 5 senses. But what we're moving in now is the 5th dimension, where everything's more heart-centered. And the 5th dimension, everything is very explicit, very authentic, and there's no space for lies and corruption, because everything's transparent. So as the energies of the planet, because you know, we're getting the solar flashes and we're getting the keys and codes from the higher dimensions literally hitting planet Earth every day, and lots of people are getting ascension symptoms and things like that. But as this happens, the light shines on the dark and exposes the truth. So, you know, Victoria's whistleblown, Nikita's work, Lucinda, all of this kind of work, as you shining a light on the shadows of the truth, because then once the light has shone, then it clears the pathway, because we cannot take all of this trauma and all of these bad practices and all of these lies and corruption. We cannot take it into the 5th dimension. So we're currently in this place. I think the dimensions are oscillating, you know, between the space between the dimensions is getting a lot thinner. The veils are getting a lot thinner. And as we progress and the 5th dimension energy is coming in, we'll get the tipping point where all of these wonderful new practices of birthing will be the norm. You know, this is the old paradigm, the old 3D, the old medical model, the old control system. Once everyone's stepped into the divine power and they've done the inner work, then, you know, all of this, these women are pioneers in this now, and this will be the norm. And I think I can't wait for that.
Yay! And look at Lucinda, little baby in her arms. How beautiful.
Something I wanted to ask. Yes, sorry, go on, Nikita.
I'm just so proud of you. Like, when you gave birth to your little boy, if I could bottle your, not courage, because you know when you hear people go, "Oh, you're brave," having a home birth, it's nothing to do with brave, it's to do with alignment. If I could bottle your alignment, your sense of self-love, and your deep connection to all that is, I would give it to the world. Because what you did, witnessing what you did that day, what you and Heath did together, that there are no words that can describe my the awe I have for you. It was beautiful, it was divine, it was connected, it was authentic. And I hope that you can share your story far and wide, because it's all well and good myself making a new structure and Victoria whistleblowing, but mums listen to mums. And at the moment, it's all about, oh my God, I got ripped fanny to bum, and you must have an epidural, and you've got to go and have a C-section because you'd be absolutely screwed, and it's so scary. These are the birth stories we hear, and of course, you can't put out a fire with fire. You put out a fire with water, or in this case, love. So I think, Lucy, your story, you should tell it to everyone that brushes by you, because it's empowering and it's triggering. Because you see it all the time, don't you? When a woman tells an orgasmic birth story on This Morning, and everyone's going, "You're disgusting," and I didn't get that, because women are triggered straight away. Well, if it's not true, then why has it offended you?
Yeah.
Where do you need to work on?
I think I was going to ask you, Victoria, and it'll lead into the story. When I was pregnant, when I laboured with my second daughter in hospital, I was induced. And this is where my story is kind of relevant for a lot of women, because I've got 4 children, 50% of them were born in a hospital setting and 50% at home. And I didn't have awful births until I learned about birth. And then I was like, oh my God, that was done to me. What did I allow? Why didn't I have a voice? But in everyone that meets my second daughter, she's very, very authentic. When you were talking earlier about children and authenticity, like, wow, I've definitely got one. And everyone that meets her says that she was born to wake me up, and my God, did she. But in the labour process, I remember bouncing on this Swiss ball and asking question after question, and I apologise for asking questions. And then what happens? And I was asking all of these things, and that's really the moment I was giving birth to her, was when I was interested in birth. It was that, which is crazy. But I was young when I had my first, and I just kind of let them do what they needed, and they told me, you're not in labor, and I was, but I was like, okay, I'm not. Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me then if I'm not in labor? But I wondered, Victoria, do women ask questions? Do they say, what drug is that, or why do I need that, or what's happening next? Do they ask questions?
I would say they wouldn't ask me that, because I am so thorough. I tell them everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So for me, it wasn't a problem. And I'd say, you don't have to have it. There's an alternative. So I was that midwife. But
Yeah.
if I went to look after a woman whose midwife had gone for lunch and they quizzed me, I would then know that the midwife potentially hadn't been fully authentic about what was going on, because she's task orientated. But you saying about your connection to your birth, if I didn't have a home birth with my third, where I was completely in control and had an initiation to womanhood, it was a ritual. If I didn't experience that, I wouldn't have known that the NHS was as bad as it was, because I've been there and I've had that connect. I've said this to a few of you already. I don't think you've heard this, but Rachel, but when I gave birth to my son, when I got up off the sofa after squatting to have him, I looked back and I could see an old version of myself. It was like, and I remember watching myself in the room. I could see where everybody was sitting. It was a ritual of connection to my divine self. So when I went from that,
I had with Ada, I floated out. That was the first time
that was exactly how I gave birth. And I can remember looking down. I can remember where my pink dressing gown was on the side. How? I was giving birth, because I detached to see the blessing of my ancestral way, the ethers connected. William Wright talked about, to harm the vulnerability of the world is to harm the portal and the vessel. It's the way to do it. So going into midwifery and having 75% of my births in hospital and that little one at home, I was very quick to see this is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas most midwives haven't had a home birth or haven't had children.
Do you say most midwives, because they say that there's a common thing with women that birth young, so late teens or early 20s, go into midwifery because they're their first memory of being saved or rescued or nurtured by midwives?
Not looked into that, but there's this real, the midwives that are the ones that want to connect are classed as woo-woo. oh, she's woo-woo. That's what you hear. So if midwives leave and become independent midwives, people just snub them. It's midwifery is, if I talk about this a lot, but the witch trials has a lot to do with the frequency and the energy and vibration of where we are today. If you look back at the word wise woman, it was changed to with woman. Midwife used to be wise woman. They've changed it all in the narrative over the years, and we could do a whole season on that. But if you watch The Witches of Scotland, it talks hugely about women's UK history around birth and nursing. It's fascinating.
When you talk about language, when I was at a university doing my cognitive behavioural course, the lecturer, literally got told off for saying the word intuition. It's like you can't use
Yes.
the word. I had to use rapid cognitive processing. Now, intuition and cognitive processing are absolutely worlds apart. One's right brain, one's left brain. But I got absolutely told off, hauled over the coals, to the point where they even had an intuition swear box.
Yeah. The doctor said gut instinct doesn't exist.
No.
That's what I was told.
Yeah.
Gut instinct doesn't exist. I'm like, what? So when the wise midwives who'd been midwives for 25 years would go, keep an eye on her.
Yeah.
Where's that come from?
You've already put your head above the parapet just because you've used words like intuition and gut instinct. Yeah, that's exactly my experience.
I don't think I've ever seen a woman's intuition wrong. I've seen it ignored.
But that's what society wants. Society wants us to move away from our intuition and our gut instinct, because your greatest ever resource is your direct connection to source. And the more you've connected to yourself to source, then once you're fully connected, you're not going to be controlled.
Yeah.
Two friends of mine recently, within 8 weeks of each other, both had babies. They didn't take any care from the hospital. They had their scans. They birthed on the full moon, and they both had their babies on a full moon. Very quick delivery. Normally, nice guidance is 24 hours for a first baby. That's not true. You find first-time mums having babies in 6 hours if they're connected to themselves.
I had a lady last year. She was amazing. She was a headmistress, and she said to me, right, I think what I'm going to do, Nikita, is I'm going to finish work on the Friday and have the baby on the Sunday. And I was like, oh, all right then. She called me about 4 o'clock in the morning on the Sunday, and I'm having really strong surges. And I was like, oh, I'll go back to bed, because she was a primip. It was her first baby. And then she called me an hour later. Well, her husband called me an hour later, and I could hear her mooing. I was like, oh shit. And so I got in the car, and I got there, and bless her, she goes, I've made you a cake, a keto cake. I was in labour. I was like, yeah. She goes, yeah. I went, you're brilliant. Anyway, she was mooing by the side of the pool, and I said, do you mind if I just have a little look? And she was crowning. I was like, oh, your baby's coming, so if you want a water birth, I suggest you get in the pool. Now, she was really calm. So she was like leaning over the birth pool, inside the pool, and she went, oh, what was that? And I went, that was your baby's head. She went, oh. And then just carried on. She did it in 3 hours, and that was her first baby.
Is that good?
Amazing.
That's probably normal. I don't think birth would have been painful as it is now. We've made it painful. You watch the TV, you've got women screaming on their backs. So girls think and women think birth is painful. And I put up a post about this the other day. How do we know that 400 years ago that birth wasn't painful? Actually, women embraced it. So I got absolutely slated, like, she's ridiculous. My birth was painful. And I thought, well, that's because you've chosen your birth. You've chosen your birth.
You compare labour pain with other pain. You can't compare birth with like toothache. You're not meant to have toothache.
No, it's otherworldly. It's of another realm.
It's otherworldly.
Yeah.
It's your muscles making a physical contraction. It's a sensation. And when I see women have good births, it's because, like you, Lucinda, they are being the epitome of a human being, not a human becoming, not a human doing. And when women have a difficult time, they're getting their own way. If you are in a coma, your head needs no input into the process whatsoever. You will just give birth. But because we go here to fear, when there is adrenaline, it stops oxytocin. Oxytocin is your love hormone, your natural painkiller. It stops the endorphins. And when you've got stimuli around you, like bright lights, feelings of being observed, strangers putting
Yeah.
their hands inside of you, that stimulates adrenaline. It stops the oxytocin, which is what is meant to facilitate birth. And it does it for very good reason. So when you've got people coming at you, Victoria, well, my birth was painful. Well, why was it painful? Now, I would never, ever label my last birth painful. It was hard work, but it's
Yeah.
called labor. But it wasn't painful, not like having a tooth out.
Yeah.
I broke my back. That was painful.
Rachel, do you want to speak?
I'd love to, yes, please. It was just with regards to a book I'd read. So I'd read Being and Dreaming by this lady, Florenda Donner, and I'd learned the lucid dreaming side, and it fascinated me. And she'd written another book called Shabano, and I read it, and it was where she'd had an experience of going into the Amazon and living with the Amazonians for, I think it was over a year. She watched a conversation between two ladies. This is kind of a long story short, but one of them was heavily pregnant, and just in conversations, they started walking into the trees, and she thought she'd follow them and kind of, just observe, I suppose. And just in the middle of this conversation, this one lady just crouched down, had this baby in the middle of conversation, and then they turned the baby's head to the ground and they walked away. And she was number one, horrified that they just left this baby to die. And number two, that there was no pain in this birth. And, just in the middle of a conversation, and she's obviously experienced the Western side. And when she questioned them, they said that, that they'd already had a child. And if they had another one, it would then jeopardize the whole family because there wasn't enough food or, resources, etc., to go around. And if the baby hadn't seen the sky, then it didn't have a soul. So they put its face to the ground so that it would just die naturally. I was like, oh my God. But they then said that the birth, there was no pain because during the pregnancy, the mother hadn't given any reason for the child not to want to come out. So, and I thought, that was quite an interesting point, that because my mother, it would have been fear, 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 fear constantly. I think my mum was in, labour with me for 36 hours. There was no way I wanted to come out. But yeah, and then I was hung from one leg and they dislocated it and had a click, is it a click hip or something? And so I've had problems with that leg ever since. And apparently I'm super angry about it, and my liver has been affected in my life because I'm super angry about this person holding me up by my leg, which I had no idea about. Anyway, but I thought it was quite an interesting point from the baby's perspective and the energetics, and how a baby picks up on everything, and what we're dealt with in society, and what's then transmuted. Baby,
Talk to me.
Talk
So
to me.
this is by one of our ladies at When Push Comes to Shove. She's an independent midwife. Baby, talk to me. So this book is outstanding. It's about the souls that are coming in, why they're wanting to come in, and why sometimes it's none of our business. It's not all about us and our experience. Babies.
Wow.
Yeah,
I think
massively.
when I had my children, I very much connected with them before they came in. I was talking to the souls of them. My second one, even before he came into me, came to choose me, and had a bit of a feel into my energy field. And I was in complete awareness of this. And you've got to remember, this is back in 2000, 1999, 1998 for my first one. So, this was not in mainstream in 1998. If you're talking about talking and conversing with the soul of your baby, no one would really pay much attention. And with my second one, he was deciding whether or not he wanted to be incarnated into this earth plane. And I got reduced fetal movements, and I was just having a conversation saying, look, if you come in, I promise I'll look after you, X, Y, Z. But I think that this connection with the soul of the baby is going to become more mainstream, like we were saying, the birth portal. I also do that death portal work as well. When people know they're going to pass over into the next realm, I will hold the space for them there. But I think that the birth and the death portals, but especially communicating with the soul of your baby, this is as you can, if as people step into their own connection with source, they're going to be able to naturally do this and they won't see it as woo-woo. They'll just naturally be connecting with the soul of the baby.
Well,
Oh, Gillian, I've just bought your book.
Oh,
I'm really excited to read it. You're definitely a woman after my own heart. Did you know that at the time of birth and the time of death, there is a huge DMT dump
yeah,
within the body?
yeah.
So dimethyltryptamine is they call it the God particle. So it's present in your pineal gland and it's also produced by your lungs. So when you do an ayahuasca trip, that's DMT, and you leave your body, you go to another dimension. But when a baby is born, it's almost like a sat nav to the 3D and then out to the 5D again. Oh, wow.
I went to an astrologer last month locally. She's hand drawn this, right? Written on the corner. She said to me, when you are born at that very moment in that time, that is your DNA imprint. That is your imprint to your mystic life. And when you die, you also have the same, and your family can look back on what was happening around the time of your death. And it's something, when she started saying to me about where all these nodes are, which took me a little while to understand, everything she said was already, in fact, it was all there. So they always say, if you want to know where you are in life, look where your Venus sign is and what house it's in. That's your life path through love. It was fascinating. So I think we're all lining, and I think I believe there's a place for everybody right now. Every woman needs a different type of connection. We're all needing different things at different stages of our lives. There's room for all of us here in this. We've got you talked about, Gillian, this new golden age, this new spiritual connection. I've noticed a huge change just in a year. It's unbelievable. So I'm not afraid to say, yes, I'm a truth seeker. Yes, I'm an anti-vaxxer. Yes, I'm gobby. Yes, I make it uncomfortable, but that's my truth. And I'm authentic with it. I won't hide and skirt around things. It's where we need to be. And I think we're all there now. We're all coming there.
When's your book going to be released, Victoria? I know you haven't started it yet.
Well, I've written my 12 chapters and I've sat there going, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm not good enough to write a book. Who do I think I am?
What?
Money wound. I don't want to earn money off people's stories. I've got all this to work through the next little while.
Wow.
But I'm aware of where I am.
Yeah, amazing. And Nikita, I mean, like, seriously, like this next year, of all the women you're going to inspire with all of your work, it's pretty phenomenal.
Should we do a festival or something?
It's a really good idea, actually.
Do that. I'd love
Why
to.
not?
Should we like bring this in somehow? You've now got we've all got something different to bring in, and it's like we could, when you go into the hospital, you've got a conveyor belt, you've got midwife scanning, We'll be like, you've got the midwife here, you've got the doula, you've got the healer, you've got the mystic, you've got the mother, you've got Rachel with your healing properties. What about this conveyor belt? This is way nicer.
Well, it is. I think that the one good thing about the way in which the hospitals work is it's quite organised, and they've got all these rules and regulations. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but they're just more organised than we are. And we, we're doing our good work. We're doing books and we're trying to get out there, and but there's a bigger space to step into, I think, here, isn't there? And I think you're completely right. Was it you that said, should we do a festival, Victoria?
Yeah.
The thing it's magical alchemy. If you look at this from another perspective, it's magical alchemy. We merge in our energy codes, the 5 of us, for example, and we can create something amazing because we just fit together.
They talk about that in this book. Talks about the women movement in the 70s, talks about the history of midwives, healers, alchemy, apothecary. Brilliant book.
I think
it's only thin, but it's really impacting.
I think Lucinda's brain is working overtime.
Honestly, there's so much like interjection that I was like the baby soul. I'm like, remember that. Obviously, my brain's not quite what it will be back.
It's amazing.
But in terms of no, go on, Nikita.
You want this? I'll bring it to you on Sunday.
Yes, bring it to me. But no, in terms of communicating with baby, like I don't think I do I dare say it? I don't think I could have or would have free birth like I did if I hadn't been communicating with the soul of my baby before, because I wasn't alone. It was like anything, like you're together,
Well, so
which
everything's got equilibrium, hasn't it? Yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. You can't have a mother without a baby. You can't have a portal without the vessel of the body. You can't. Everything comes in equals.
and
So
when I was pregnant with Elodie, I had this hind water leak, and I was like, oh, because the last time I had that, I went into hospital and I got induced. So it was a real test. I was like, what is this? So I sat and I meditated, and she told me to put my feet up and to rest, and it would reseal. I didn't know that was possible. I hadn't done my course. I hadn't gone and learned about that. And it did. It resealed. She took another. So my waters went on the 27th of Jan. She was born the 24th of Feb.
oh my God, I love
Yeah.
Wow,
See, as a
that-
midwife, the midwife in me goes,
Yeah.
litigation. But now I've gone, no, she was in her power.
You'll like this. So I've got a friend who used to be an independent midwife. She's retired now. And this was in the 90s. She had a client, and her client rang her and said, my waters have just gone. She was term. And unfortunately, my friend's mother had just died, and she was from New Zealand. So she said to her client, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to send another independent midwife. I have to go to New Zealand to my mother's funeral. And the client went, no, it's fine. I'll wait. And my friend said, what do you mean you'll wait? And she goes, no, I don't want this baby without you. So I'll wait. How long are you going to be? And she said, about 12 days. And she went, yeah, that's fine. I'll wait. Her waters had gone. And the midwife was like, okay. So she goes off to New Zealand, comes back 2 weeks later, calls the mum, what did you have? She goes, no, I told you I'd wait. And she said, what, you haven't had the baby? And she says, no, have you had sleep? And my friend said, not yet. And she goes, go and have a nap, wake up, and I'll have the baby. And that's exactly what she did.
I love it. Amazing.
The
This is
power
what
of
we're missing.
intention. The power of intention. We are so much more magical and powerful, but we've been told that we're not. But you've got evidence, clear evidence there of the magical intention.
Can I ask a question about, I know it sounds a little bit silly, but so we're told that, the legs should be spread to have a birth. Does it do the opposite to the hips? So if your knees are kind of in, does that enable the hips to spread out to have a baby? Is it the opposite to what we've been told?
If you're okay, so look at my hands here, right? So
Yeah.
just put my hands on my knees and look at the space between my hands. If I put my knees in, or let's do it that way, look at the space that opens up. Now that's only if the baby is literally in the pelvis. It can have the opposite effect if baby's not quite descended yet. If you lay on your back and give birth, your pelvic outlet will decrease by 30%.
Wow. Hence
You
why
need the
they want
back
you on your back.
space. You need the back space. When you enter a birth route, a space, and a woman is on her, normally she'll lean over. That's the normal place. You'll notice the coccyx on the back stretches out, and there's a little, like a bulge. There's a head coming into this. Oh, I hate the word birth canal. I'll never want to use it ever again. Bringing this head down, it pushes the coccyx back. So you now got a visual sign that there's a baby on its way. It's imminent. So you need the space. But if you're flat on your back, women always do this if they're on their back. They can't get comfortable. I've never ever been able to labor on my back. When I look back, apart from my first, I was absolutely knocked out with an epidural. But the others, I have to get off my back naturally.
My first, I was put into stirrups and strapped down onto my back.
Yeah.
9
Yeah,
pound
not-
baby. Just saying.
Well, it's 11:11.
Oh,
1111.
Yeah, so since Heath's birth, every time I look at my phone, the time, and honestly, it's getting a bit annoying actually. It's angel hours. It's just, 3:33 or
1155.
It's just constant. Something
My radio interview was 1 hour, 33 minutes and 11 seconds long.
yeah, what is that? And when someone's like sends me a voice note of like 1 minute 11 seconds, I'm like, oh, Something I do really, really want to say, and I don't want to forget of saying it, is I birthed this time in front of my daughters. So I've got three children. One was sleeping, who's 2. So she did say she was going to sleep and wake up and baby would be born, and that was exactly it. But I've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and for me, I was able to birth in front of them, which is massive for me, because if I can show them that having a baby isn't big and scary, and they could giggle at the noises mummy was making, and them kind of get into, because I was chanting. I didn't realize until like about 5 days later, I said to James, was I chanting? I had like a flashback to the birth, and he was like, yeah, that's when the girls started laughing. I was like, oh, damn it, I wish I'd got that. Like, what was I chanting? And my sister was here for the birth as well, and my mother. So it literally, we were snowed in. If I wanted a midwife there, they wouldn't have got to us. Thank goodness nothing did go wrong, because it wasn't going to, because I would have been helicoptered. But we live in the middle of nowhere, and my mum and sister had to get dropped off on the main road, and they had to walk down the long drive, which is about half a mile, in the snow with my sister's collie. So they brought the dog. The dogs are there. And in the birth video, you've got our dog knocking James's arm as I'm getting into the pool and stuff. Like, it was so, my mum said it was like going back 100 years to go and support.
I've got goosebumps.
Birthing. And it's the second birth my mum's witnessed. She's witnessed both my free births. She's just meant to have been there, I think. But it's the first baby I've ever birthed in water. And in the video, you'll see the girls, they're walking round the pool, and they're there, and they all cry afterwards, and you can hear them sobbing, can't you, Nikita, Gillian? In the background, you can hear them sobbing, and the connection to them, to me, to them now as a woman, that hey, you can just have a baby, and this is how you can do it. And they can see James holding me and telling me how much he loves me, and we bring in our son together and up through the waters. Like, that's their idea of birth. And like, I've got a very authentic child, which literally will say to the woman at the swimming pool that's bottle feeding her baby, oh, don't your breasts work?
I love
This
it.
is what is needed. The mirror to that woman that she's brought. Wow.
I know.
Amazing.
Then I'm still like mopping up. I'm like, oh, it's just because I help women breastfeed for a living. It's also, sorry.
I remember asking that question to a lady, because I grew up in Brazil, and she was breastfeeding this baby, and she was drinking coffee, and I said, is the baby drinking the coffee that you're swallowing now?
Yeah.
And they kind of looked at me like, what a question to ask. But yeah, it wasn't until I moved actually to the UK. I was vaccinated to the hills, and I was a very sick child for most of my life. And then it's only really been through all the cleansing. I was like a man until I was like in my late 30s, pretty much, because of all the medication I was, to be on, because I just couldn't stop bleeding or fainting or, all the rest of it. It was horrific. So when I cleansed for a whole month, it was like, I've never had so many dreams about being a mummy, having something, this lump in my belly, holding on to a child, holding a baby. Every single night I felt like I was going crazy, like I'd just become a woman. And I'd had all these like baby. And my husband and I were like, we'd agreed not to have children. I wasn't really that bothered. I was more a man, really. So when I turned around and I was like, I think I want a baby, he just went ballistic, and I thought, well, this is not the man for me then. But yeah, it's an interesting one, because our hormones are, they're built for this. And I think that the more we go into the natural side of things, and we cleanse our bodies, and we go through our traumas and release our traumas. So 2 years ago, I was able to release a lot of this trauma. thinking, it's going to take me like years and years, like that kind of story of you go and see someone to help you, and you walk out, or you walk in with 2 issues and you walk out with 20, but you're going to be able to see this therapist for a very long time because you've now got hundreds and thousands of issues. But it wasn't like that, and I chose things quite strategically, and it was literally 3 hours of trauma therapy, and it was. Is someone having to go or something? Sorry, I've just seen.
Victoria needs to go in a second.
Sorry. Okay. But yeah, so it was. I've totally lost my track. Saw these messages popping up. But it's intrinsic to us, and I
But you've
think
probably
that
connected to yourself more now, Rachel, haven't you? You've really connected to yourself. And, when I met you, I was absolutely blown away by even just the way you spoke publicly. I thought this woman really knows herself. That's how, when I first met you, that's what I got from you, was she knows herself. She's in control of who she is. And that's what I felt from you straight away.
thank
That's
you.
where you are.
That's so lovely. But and it is, and we can ground and we can send love outside. And I know that I'm connected because when I do this and I do it outside, all the birds just come. I seem to be like a bird magnet. It's owls at night and foxes and badgers and all the rest of it. But then during the day, I've got all the birds coming constantly. And there was one point I remember seagulls just kind of hovering over my house. But they were like, they stayed there. They just stayed and stayed and stayed. And then all these tiny birds just flew into all the bush. I was like, this is just magical. They don't know why they're coming, but they're coming for the love. They're definitely coming for love.
Birds carry souls, carry them in and carry them away. And we've been kind of told that it's like a stork, and all of that. But I do think birds are massively doing something with souls. I truly do feel that.
Wow. Yeah. But are you having to go, Victoria? I'm so sorry.
I've got to go, and I've got somebody turning up to look at a window, so I don't want my dog to bark and ruin the recording. So what's next?
Festival.
Yes, I was going to say the festival.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah, well, Lucinda is amazing arty wise, aren't you, darling?
I think I can see that from her house.
Yeah. And then randomly, I worked at, I was consulting for Reed Exhibitions many eons ago in a previous life. So I consulted for those. So yeah, we've got probably loads of experience between us.
Yeah, what I did before all of the babies was events. So
is it watch this space in terms of a date? Should we look at a date? Is it going to be a summer thing? Can we wear dresses?
Let's do it. Let's get the recording stopped.
Okay. Stop the recording then.